2018 marks the 120th anniversary of Peking University. What qualities have made it China's top higher education institution throughout this time? Embracing diversity and thinking freely is the legacy of Tsai Yuanpei, who was an early principal of Peking University in the 20th century. How has his legacy passed through the generations there? Recently, a speech made by University President Lin Jianhua at its 120th anniversary ceremony went viral because of a pronunciation mistake. Lin made an apology the next day, but some netizens were still not satisfied. What's behind this dispute? The modern educational system has a longer history in the West than in China, so what benefits could China still hope to gain from its example?
This year, Peking University is marking its 120th anniversary. The leading institution of Chinese higher education for more than a century, its scholars included 3 key founding members of the Chinese Communist Party in the 1920s, Mao Zedong, Dazhao, and Chen Duxiu. Additionally, it was the cradle of the May the 4th movement, which helped to push China towards being the modern nation it is today. But Peking University has also come under criticism recently because of certain media events going viral. So how should we evaluate the overall reputation of the university and its long history of exceptional education and alumni? To consider Peking University on the occasion of this anniversary today, I'm happy to be joined by Professor Li Jinzhao from Beijing Foreign Studies University and He Jing, attorney of Anjie Law Firm, who is also an alumnus of Peking University. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Welcome to Dialogue. The commemoration of its 120th anniversary of Peking University was highlighted and featured prominently for at least one major reason. President Xi Jinping went to Peking University to witness the jubilation as well as the spirit of Peking University on this important occasion. Now, by the way, this is the 6th time for him to went to Peking University after he took office. So what do you think of the significance of commemorating Peking University today in China?
Well, thank you for having me here. Although I'm not a graduate of Peking University, my sister graduated from Peking University, and one of my uncles also taught at the university before retirement. Well, to answer your question, Peking University is very important, not only in China's modern education, but also in China's modern history, because it is an icon of China's strive for modernization. It is an icon of China's development of modern nationalism. It is also an icon of China's education's role in social change. So because of all that, I think it's very important and significant for Xi to visit Peking University multiple times.
A beneficiary of Peking University's excellent education, He Jing, what do you make of the spirit?
You know, for a long time, I think the Peking University represented 2 things: the dedication of the whole nation to democracy and the dedication to science. So we have this 2 famous logo, you know, we call Mr. De and Mr. Sai. So I think that's really shows that actually the historical, the dedication or the commitment of the whole China to these 2 things. When we talk about the university, it's not really about the university, it's really what's underneath. You know, think about the Peking University is probably the very first the university that China ever established since back in the 18th century, 19th century, and it really represents the whole movement. China wants to transform its education, and plus the dedication, the pursuit of patriotism. You know, when you talk about the May 4th, the movement that happens right after the First World War, and the students actually really went to the street. They really made a huge difference to the history. So I think our President Xi's visits shows and reiterates all the commitments of China.
When we say Mr. De, it means Mr. Democracy. Mr. Sai means Mr. Science. The official rhetoric commemorating the spirit of Peking University remains patriotism. But I notice your use of nationalism instead of patriotism.
Yeah.
Do you think the student movement that was first pioneered by students of Peking University in the early 20th century reflected more of a nationalism or what we call patriotism, an asset that we must keep in mind today in our process of transformation from a pre-modern to a modern society?
Yeah, I would like to use the word nationalism because the Main Force movement started when China's international rights were under threat after the end of World War I. So China's lands were ceded or were occupied by Japan, but after Japan lost the war, then it was not returned to China. So it was a crisis of national identity and national interests. I don't think nationalism is necessarily a bad term. There's a wide spectrum of the meaning of nationalism. It can be very positive and it can be very empowering.
Representatives of the old Chinese government were seriously humiliated at the Paris Peace Conference.
Right.
And therefore we had the student movement, which today, however, becomes a sensitive phrase in our political vocabulary. So when we review the spirit of the May the 4th movement, why do you think most of those who do research about this part of Chinese history prefer to call it the Chinese equivalent of the Enlightenment movement? He Jing?
I think it's because of the young people. If you look at the history, whether in China and many other countries, the generation that normally make the big difference are the young people. Normally at the sort of crisis time for the nation or for the country, it's actually young people who make the first big move. It's very interesting, right? It's probably also a human phenomenon. That's the power of young people. They are courageous and they really do what they really think. So that's really amazing, and then that's the power of the youth. So actually we think when we commemorate the big anniversary of the university, that's the very first university of China, it's really about part of it's about the people, the power of the young people, and of course the power of knowledge, the power of the scholars. I think that's something we have to bear in mind.
Yeah, the spirit of being fearless.
The three critical members who helped establish the Chinese Communist Party in Shanghai also worked in Peking University, Mr. Dazhao, Mao Zedong, and Chen Duxiu. Looking back, what do you think of their rebellious character? A spirit of rebellion in refuting the old realities of China in the 1920s.
Yeah, actually, according to my research, among the 53 attendees of the first Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, 21 were from Peking University, either as a student or as faculty or as professors.
That is indeed amazing.
It's amazing. It's almost a half. So it really shows that Peking University was always spearheading key moments of China's revolution and social reform. It was at the moment of China's national crisis, and they saw the necessity for China to catch up with the rest of the world, both in terms of modernization of society and the modernization of technology and production systems.
Arguably, what we call social transformation or westernization, if not modernization of the Chinese society, somehow started from the May the 4th movement, and we drew inspirations from democracy and science. Behind this transformation that arguably started from the May the 4th movement, we had the spirit of individual liberty, libertarianism. This becomes somehow controversial in the present-day Chinese politics. However, when we go back to review the history, how important is the spirit of libertarianism that we saw from the student movement that broke out from the campus of Peking University?
Well, for any societies, I think that the spirit of libertism is important. Okay, of course, but in today's world, the challenge is how you taking into account of the everything, and have that spirit really work, okay, without damaging other interests, especially for a very fast-growing society. And that's actually a big job for governments, for the thought leaders, for the general public, and even for students themselves. And especially in today's internet era, the information passes on very quickly. Social media played a huge role. Okay, now in a way that people are much freer to do almost anything. Okay, they have much more resources. Now,
let me bring you back to a controversial event that just took place on your campus, the Peking University campus. Mr. Lin is currently president of Peking University. His mispronunciation of an archaic Chinese word caused an uproar on the media, social media in particular. Later on, he apologized for this reckless or slip of tongue. But unfortunately, in the conclusion of his letter of apology, he said, controversially, being skeptical or to scrutinize does not add to value or create values. Literally, that's what he said in the letter of apology. And that caused a strong repercussion once again, because he questioned the spirit of being skeptical. A lot of the netizens pointed out, without the spirit of being skeptical, we would not have had what is called the Peking University or its history. Right. So what do you think of this event?
Well, I think netizens wanted to take the statement made by President Lin Jianhua out of his context. I think he intended to say that although I made a minor mistake, you should focus on the message I wanted to convey. You should have trust on me and on Peking University. But if you examine the sentence itself, it seems problematic, because
the sentence itself seems pretty misleading.
Right.
It's been taken out of context.
Because sometimes some people think it's a little bit defensive, okay? But I don't really think probably President Lin right now doesn't need anybody to defend him, and I'm pretty sure he's big enough and not to really trying to find some excuse for himself. The problem in today's world is not just in China, okay? It's a kind of persistent complaint by the general public or by different organizations or even the individual for ourselves. Those are persistent and unwanted complaints. Yes, some person, even a celebrity, or big person, like as big as the president of Peking University, made a mistake. Now, yes, the mistake.
He's human enough to make mistakes, like everyone else.
Yes,
he probably should look at what his courage of caring for what netizens are saying, and his courage of actually spending time to write a letter of apology and share it to the public. That's a very great, very good move, and it shows like his concern. But critical thinking is very important. I think that's what the netizens are talking about.
Let's look at this media event from another perspective, He Jing and Dazhao. Maybe he should have issued a very short letter with a few sentences, and they are enough to express his sincerity in apologizing to the netizens in their millions. He would just say, well, I'm a major of chemistry, and Putonghua or Mandarin is not something I'm good at.
That probably will be a sort of quote-unquote a better or clever PR strategy.
Exactly, that's the point of my next question. So what do you think of his communicative skills as the top administrator of Peking University? The ability to manage some of the public events, I mean crisis of public events, may be one of the major traits of important administrator of such an important organization and university, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's a good thing that he apologized openly, but he shouldn't take public's attack on him too personally. Actually, they are not criticizing him. They're criticizing the bureaucratic system. First of all, he didn't have time to go through his speech in advance. He didn't have time to write his own speech.
But I'm afraid that another important part of the context was yet another major media event. Yue Xin, a female student also from the Peking University. She actually is a student of the Chinese department of Peking University, complained about the transparency of an investigation into a sex scandal that took place 2 decades ago concerning the suicide of a victim of a rape. And what do you think of the way the students' complaints was handled by the political instructor, so-called? I mean, those who are engaged in what we call political education on the campus.
It's a very, very tough one. It's a very, very tough situation. You know, as we said, in today's world, the social media make things pass on so quickly. And when you don't really know what really happened, there's a lot of things are taken out of the context. I personally really think either our President Lin's the sort of the event and also the Yue Xin's the event really more showed the high attention of today's Chinese people on our higher education, probably educational system, because you and I know that in today's China, people have a lot of different opinion about in what way the education should be done. So many sort of richer family who can afford the better tuition, they send their children to overseas for education. The number is amazing. That shows some kind of that's actually skepticism about our education. So in a way, probably general public should look into how skeptical they are about the China education, and the people inside the educational system should look into what we can do to make an educational system better. Okay, but we know this is actually a global challenge. Even if you're talking to the people in an American higher education system, they probably even have a bigger issue with the way they are doing their education. So I think it's really all the dissatisfaction or disappointments or the high expectation somehow putting our school, Peking University, at the center of the attention. If it's not this Yue Xin's incident, if it's not for the Mr. Lin's this mistake, there's something else gonna trigger. This I call triggering so much the dissatisfaction or criticism. I think that really probably shows why it is that.
And do you agree to the understatement that He Jing delivered about the campaign to bash Mr. Lin, the president of Peking University, namely quality of the education, the spirit of good education?
Well, I think if we put these two cases together, we can see that there is a consensus among the public and also high education system. I mean, students within the system. There's a kind of discontent or disillusionment or disappointment with the administrative system and bureaucracy. I think the students just want more immediate response from the school authorities and from the administrative system. The Me Too movement, the anti-harassment call by ordinary students should be properly answered by the authority, but they just think that it's a minor issue. But from the general students' perspective, it's a very big issue. So I think the administrators should not be so out of sync with the public sentiment widely shared among college students.
Despite our respect for President Lin of Peking University, don't you think he's just a poor guy compared with other big names who were also presidents of this prestigious university like Cai Yuanpei, Yanfu, Hu Shi? What do you think of the legacy that has been handed down from those big guys? He Jing.
Well, every generation has its own issues or topical priority. Now, taking on, I think our President Lin definitely realized or even aware that what kind of accountability, the kind of accountability he's shouldering when he take on the appointment. Okay, he's the Peking University, the president. You will subject to all kinds of a misperception. You will subject to the kind of challenges. Okay. So I think he's big enough to take that. Now, again, I think the bigger issue right now, even for the public, for all this public debate, is what else should we do? For example, this Me Too movement and sexual harassment policies. I think Peking University is actually working on that. It's not the Peking University, none of the other universities probably have a very good policy in this area. It's a totally new thing. Even the U.S., this is a new thing. It's just starting. I think it's going to be a global phenomenon.
And do you think the event of Professor Shen Yang, who used to work in Peking University 2 decades years ago was only tip of a huge iceberg concerning the Chinese equivalent of Me Too.
I think so. And
How serious is this, do you think, on the campus?
Well, I think he represents a proportion of professors taking advantage from college students. But I also think that the cases of sexual harassment are much more severe even off campus, even in workplaces, even in business areas and in administrative systems. But people put higher education, put the administrators and the professors on a higher moral ground. So they think that they at least should first be very self-disciplined and should pay respect to gender equality and to women.
Jin Zhao, do you agree that one of the messages that we can draw from the Me Too movement in the United States is the rise of feminism, or the present-day version of women's lib in the 21st century, the burgeoning awareness of emancipation of women from the background of humility.
Yeah.
You know, one of the major principles for women today is to be more independent and to be more critical and to be able to stand out and say, so and so was the bad guy in Me Too, in the sexual harassment. So what do you think of this kind of burgeoning public awareness in terms of women's lib today?
Well, the Me Too movement is definitely helping the public as well as women to realize that it's not their fault if sexual harassment takes place or if they suffer sexual harassment. And the more people talk about it, the less stigma victims will suffer. And the more people are willing to voice their sufferings and voice their opinion. So it's a long way. I think both American women and European women and Asian women, they show that they are really fed up and sick of this long ongoing inequality. Although by law, by principle, the spirit of gender equality has been going on for decades. In practice, we still need a lot of improvements, a lot of
I think it's a time.
revision. Yeah.
You know, it's time. You know, I'm
time.
an employer. Okay, I'm an employer of a number of very talented lawyers, and actually the majority are women lawyers.
Yeah, he said
okay?
that.
So
very talented women
lawyers. It's
lawyers.
really the time now, and then first of all, yes, women will not tolerate that. Even for people who have a sense about it, you don't want your women employees, your partners, your women boss to be subject to this nonsense. This is a horrible harassment. If you want to be more productive, you want more creativity out of your country, out of your society, you better respect your women, right? I think it's happening global-wise. Actually the faster it's happening, I think the probably is better. The better energy, the better momentum the country is having.
Jin Zhao and He Jing, with regard to the prospects of higher education in China or in the Chinese market, we got to take a second look at what the U.S. government did recently about further visa restrictions on student exchange programs between the United States and China, due to the fact that more from the American establishment tend to label China as a strategic competitor, a competitor more, or a threat, so to speak, more serious than even the threat that they have from ISIL, the terrorist organization, because China is catching up so quickly in, for example, the area of digital technology. And so we have the ongoing trade war between the two biggest economies. In this context, my question is, do you think Chinese students should be more inward-looking instead of opting for the other side of the Pacific Ocean for their future, their career development? because they used to think that the United States is a melting pot, it's a nation of immigration. It encourages immigration. Today is no longer the case, since this president at least puts America first. So don't you think it's high time for the Chinese parents and their children to think twice about how important it is to opt for a prestigious university like Peking University, Tsinghua, Renda, Beijing Foreign Studies University, and they can do their own academic research here. But of course on condition that the independence of academic research, the ability to think freely, should be highly respected by the Chinese authorities.
Yeah. Well, I think proportionally, the number of Chinese students seeking education abroad is still minimum as compared to the large population of Chinese students domestically. So no matter how much, first of all, we should improve the educational quality of top-tier universities in China. But there's always the necessity of cross-cultural educational exchange. So I don't think Chinese parents should think for a second if they are able to provide their children international education. At least the students should seek study abroad or seeking a PhD or
There's no
master's
question
degree
about
abroad.
a spiritual commonwealth that we should share, or in other words, a 命运共同体, community of shared future in the 21st century. However, my point is, what do you think of a level playing field, or more respect for free flow of human capital? Today we have the rise of populism that rejects immigration. I'm not talking about prejudice against Muslims in Europe or in the United States following 9/11. What are your thoughts, He Jing?
Chinese parents, of course, they want the best for their children. Okay, that's the first thing. So they have to do whatever they can make available for their children. The second thing is that I think the R&D, the best results, the best creativity, the best innovation always come from this free flow of information. That's one of the foundation for the creativity or innovation. So I'm hoping that the U.S. government, the policy will be changed, will be reversed. And ultimately, for any country, even for the U.S., right, if you want to have the best group of talents, and you have to allow the human talent to move around. In fact, I think the U.S. is so far the largest beneficiary of the inflows of talents from the world. Okay, well, if the policy still there, if unfortunately the blockade will be there for long term, then you have to, I mean, China or any other country, they have to find their ways to keep educating the best group of people, the young generation.
Presumably, do you think if we were to dismantle the firewalls that block free flow of information on the internet by the Chinese authorities, there would be more students and scholars who prefer to stay in China and do academic research independently and freely?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, if they can surf the internet more freely, then they will get more international sources for their research projects. Then they may not need to. And if they also have access to publications of different books from different countries.
A lot of it taken place over the past decade or so to reform education or university of higher learning, such as the enlargement of the enrollment. That also creates problems for the employment and job market. Very quickly, before we conclude this discussion, what do you think should be done as the most important thing that should be prioritized on the agenda of educational reform for tertiary education? Well,
if there's only one sentence, I would say the government should really invest much more on education. Still, our educational input is still too limited.
I think China should the best educators. They should let the best educator to run the education school.
Right, and perhaps to invest more in rural areas where students may not have a wealth of the family support, but they should enjoy equal access to higher education in China. Thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.